It's my top value plays for week 9 on DraftKings and FanDuel, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to another daily fantasy sports video. Do me a favor and smash the like button before you forget. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel as well, but make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. We're going to walk through the top value plays at each position for week 9. I do think that there's a few key plays that we'll need to talk about. This is something that I would be using to start my cash games, my GPPs. I do think that starting at the bottom when building lineups, that's one of the best ways to do it. I think there's two ways to do it. I think that the first way is kind of locking in your stack first and then kind of building from there, seeing what value fits. The second way is building in what you think are the lowest salary players that you could see yourself playing on a given week, and then kind of upgrading from there. That's typically how I like to do it. So we're going to go through each position, kind of give you those value plays. Hopefully that'll kind of assist you in your roster construction. This will be coming out on a Saturday. Do want to remind you guys, if you want to hang out with us on stream, make sure you check me out over twitch.tv/Joe Holka. And I will tell you as well, if you have an Amazon Prime account, you already have access to a free Twitch Prime subscription. So just make sure you're kind of taking advantage of that. If you're watching this over on YouTube, come hang out with us live. We got a bunch of questions that we'll kind of work our way through in the chat as well. Let's start with the quarterback position. So what I tend to value is exactly what's on the sheet. Again, this is something that is available to all my Twitch subscribers. It's something that I put a lot of time into each and every week. It is in the Discord, posted, updated a couple times throughout the week as well. But at each position, I'm basically putting in what I think is the most important thing to be looking at as far as metrics are concerned, but also game environment. So if this is your first time kind of seeing this sheet, it's hard to read some of these numbers for a reason. I'm not really too concerned with some of the middle stats. I want to see the tails, right? So I want to see a game environment where there's going to be 65 offensive plays, or I want to see an offensive line like Miami, who might be one of the worst offensive lines in the league, stuff like that. So that's what I'm focusing on, is the tails of that sort of thing. Same thing with matchup. So one of the things that I think is super valuable is looking at how teams look as far as their defense against short passes versus their defense against deep passes. So that's something that I'm paying pretty close attention to. Surge PDX, thanks for your Twitch Prime, man. Thanks for being with us. Always like to see people kind of take advantage of that when they can. But regardless, guys, even if you don't subscribe, just being here, more than enough, trust me. So appreciate that. So this week in particular, the thing that I'm almost always trying to build in at quarterback is a rushing floor. So Josh Allen, someone that I've talked about a decent amount as far as someone that can give us that floor. We haven't seen kind of that ceiling game from him. So I think at 6,500, he's not really going to qualify as a value. My favorite value play at the quarterback position is definitely going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. So 4,800 on DraftKings, you can do so much with your team with that. So a couple of things that stand out to me. Of course, Miami's offensive line, one of the worst, if not the worst, in the entire league. So if you would look at that from that perspective, you might not be that interested in a quarterback. But this opponent, the New York Jets, and this is a pressure rate stat that comes from Sports Info Solutions. Shout out those guys doing some awesome stuff with data and offensive line. A ton of different data points that are super high level. But from what this is telling me is that the Jets don't pressure a lot. So I don't know if it's really a big deal that Miami is 32nd or so, depending on what rankings or what sack metrics you're looking at on the offensive side. One of the worst in the league for sure, but I don't know if that matters so much for Fitz this week. So it is kind of a lower team total. That's something that is extremely important at the quarterback position. So I'm paying attention to that, but I do like this tight spread as well. It's something that if there's going to be potential to kind of shoot out here, I like that. I will say his yards per attempt is not very high, but we know Fitz will air it out. And one thing that his average intended air yards have told us in kind of a small sample this year is he will do that. So I think that he's somewhere probably in the middle of those two metrics, but I will say the Jets are one of the worst teams at defending that deep pass. So I love Fitz this week. I think you compare him with Preston Williams. I think you compare him with Devante Parker. Those are the guys that I'm kind of keying in on right now. But what I love about Fitzpatrick at 4,800, he's not going to be a zero for us on the ground, guys. I wouldn't be shocked if he got us close to 20 yards or so on the ground. Haven't projected for just under that right now. So I like him quite a bit. So at the quarterback position, definitely think Ryan Fitzpatrick is my guy. Not so much on Brandon Allen. I actually think that the Cleveland defense could end up feasting on this guy. Again, another poor offensive line. I do think that Cleveland will be getting a little pressure in this game, but I don't love the game environment for Brandon Allen, so I think it's still Fitzpatrick for me. What are you guys on in the chat? I'll look through a couple more of these guys right now before we move on to running back. Do I like pairing Fitz with Williams or Parker more? I'm a Preston Williams guy, if I had to pick one. Where are the points coming from? Yeah, who knows? It might not be a high-scoring game, but at 4,800, that seems like a pretty decent spot to attack from value for sure. Lots of green on your Tannehill row. Okay, let's talk about Tannehill. So 5,300, you can definitely say he is a strong value as well. My big issue with Ryan Tannehill is this QB skill number right here. So this column, essentially what this is telling me is the quarterback's skill while under pressure. So it's essentially just the difference between his yards per attempt while in a clean pocket versus while he's under pressure. So a couple guys that do extremely well under pressure. Russell Wilson. Small sample for Matt Moore, so maybe ignore that one. But Carson Wentz does really well under pressure. Someone else, Deshaun Watson, always seems to pop really well in that metric. But then there's a couple guys that really struggle under pressure. Ryan Tannehill is one of those people. So last week against the Jets, wasn't really too concerned with that because, again, the same kind of argument for Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't think he's going to see much pressure anyway. This week against Carolina, I think he's going to see a lot more pressure. So I'm not as interested in Ryan Tannehill. If they do end up getting a decent amount of pressure in that, I prefer would just probably to pay down a little bit more. This Carolina defense is the real deal. I do think that the kind of nice thing about Tannehill is he should give us a little bit on the ground as well, even though he didn't last week. It's a tougher matchup for sure, though. I don't know if there's really any kind of sugarcoating that. And I don't love kind of the pass options there as well. Like this team, like look at this, second in the league versus deep passes. So that might limit the upside for some of his wide receivers anyway. Someone in the chat was saying bringing pressure and applying pressure can be two different things. Jets are one of the highest blitz percentage teams, not effective. I mean, I'm not looking just at, so adjusted sack rate is not to get too far in the weeds here, but adjusted sack rate at Football Outsiders, that's looking purely at sacks when they finally get there. But pressure rates, I mean, a team can blitz all they want. I don't really care about that. I care about how many pressures they're getting on quarterbacks. So if the team's blitzing and they're still not getting pressures, I prefer to look at the pressure metrics. I think that that's kind of, it's not necessarily to the far extreme where they got a sack, they didn't get the sack, like adjusted sack rate. But the pressure metrics, I think, are by far the best at defensive line. So even if the Jets are blitzing a lot, they're not effective, exactly what you just said. Yeah, it's possible that this this offensive line for Miami is literally that bad. But they haven't really shown much yet. So, I mean, I think it's a valid point, something to look at. But I do think that there's a strong argument still in going after Fitzpatrick at that price. Someone's saying Moore is a better value than Fitz. Same ownership percentage. Let's look at Moore. Okay, so Matt Moore, 4,800, great price. It is Minnesota. They're at home, so I'll give you that. Better team total. Give you that. We should probably say that Mahomes is questionable at this point, but if you're watching this later, Kansas City, I like the situation from a game flow perspective. I think is pretty nice. I think there's going to be a decent amount of plays on that side, at least above average. My issue with Matt Moore is he doesn't push the ball down the field at all. Doesn't give us any rushing yards at all. So for me, I think it's still Ryan Fitzpatrick at the same price. Probably end up being similar ownership. I don't have that exact number on this. I'll have to update that before I update the Discord again with this. But yeah, I wouldn't expect him to be any more than kind of Fitzpatrick's ownership regardless. All right, let's talk about running back, guys. So the big news, I guess, is that James Conner is looking like he is doubtful in this game. So Jalen Samuel, 4K. It's really hard to justify building many lineups, if any, in cash games without Jalen Samuel. So I'm one of those people that I'm almost always paying up for volume. If you've watched any of my content before, that's what I'm prioritizing on each and every slate. Jalen Samuels, however, it doesn't mean I won't pay down for a quarterback or for a tight end or for a running back. But volume is so, running back position in particular is so driven by volume. I want these guys where I can actively project them for a ton of touches, a ton of receptions. So Jalen Samuels fits that bill. In comparison to someone like AP, 4,200, good matchup against Buffalo. He's probably going to get his 20 or so touches, but I avoid these type of guys that don't catch passes. So there's probably going to be some Derrick Henry talk this week because of this matchup against Carolina. 32nd, I get it. Massive run funnel. Those plays, like, sure, if he gets the bonus, gets multiple touchdowns, you could get there. But at the same time, the ceiling of these guys is so much different, in my opinion. So from a value perspective, I don't see a ton of plays this week outside of Jalen Samuel. So the running back portion of this is going to be a shorter one. Happy to go through some of these other plays that I'm sure people are talking about in chat. Someone's talking about roster construction with Samuel, CMC, and Cook. Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to do that. I don't think that that's a bad play at all. If you played Samuels, McCaffrey, and Dalvin Cook, you're locking up a lot of this volume, my friend. I don't think it's a bad play at all. Hess is asking about the Denver running backs. Yikes. So this is a great example of something I would avoid at the running back position. So Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman. They're just right about 5K. Really bad game environment, tough plays. They're at home, painfully low team total, basically a split share down the middle. Good matchup. Do we care? I don't know. Like, it's at that point, like, this is a big difference in touches for me. So I think that someone's argument in the chat is that they're going to have to run because they have no quarterback. Okay, which one are you playing then? You have any idea? I don't think you can play either of these guys, to be honest. Maybe so. I will say maybe you're playing some really large field stuff. Just for the running back is not a position where I'm really going to take those type of chances. No one is talking about Le'Veon Bell as a best matchup. I love it. Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be more about value, but yeah, I'm with you, man. I think that Le'Veon's in an awesome spot this week. Let's move on to wide receiver because I want to spend a little bit more time on some of these other positions. So wide receiver, we're just looking purely at the value side of things. There's definitely a few guys that stand out this week. I think that if you really wanted to go all the way down to like the 3K range, it's tough sledding this week. I think you could probably make an argument for a guy like Anthony Miller at 3,700, but let's talk about this 4K range first. One of the guys that I have painfully been playing quite a bit over the short term is a guy like Mike Williams. So Mike Williams, 4,600. He's going to pop in a lot of these things that I think really matter. Weighted opportunity rating is one of them. Free metric. Shout out Josh Hermsmeyer. So he's top 10 in this metric still. It takes into account target share, takes into account market share of air yards. Mike Williams is a team that has been throwing a ton. So over the last 3 games, the Chargers have been throwing on 70% of their offensive plays. So at some point, regression should hit with a guy like Mike Williams. Is it going to be against Green Bay this week? I have no idea. He's dropped a couple in the end zone for sure. I don't love the spot for this offensive line for the Chargers. I've definitely talked about that quite a bit this week as well. Green Bay's a team that can get to the quarterback a little bit. Mike Williams at 4,600 is the least interesting. Steve Boynton with the sharp DJ Moore take. Yeah, I'm with you, man. If Samuels is limited at all, I think DJ Moore is super interested. So let's talk about these Carolina guys because I think both of them are pretty solid. So Curtis Samuel, 4,300. Again, like that's an egregious price for a guy that is kind of popping in that type of metric in this spot. So I'm in on Curtis Samuel if we can prove his health. But if we can't, and he does seem to be limited, DJ Moore is someone that definitely makes a ton of sense in this spot. So Tennessee, below average against short passes, below average against deep passes. But if we're just projecting pure volume, I mean, 5.8 receptions for DJ Moore at 4,800. I think that's a pretty great spot. So I think you can play these Carolina wide receivers with Christian McCaffrey. I don't think that really matters. I don't think you have to play their quarterback if that's the case either. But they both stand out as guys that could be drastically underpriced. Yeah, let's talk about Watkins. I've heard some Watkins love. I actually haven't dug into this one a ton yet. So let's find him here. So Sammy Watkins, 4,900. Spot against Minnesota, not ideal, but they are at home. Decent team total. We know that's important. This is kind of borderline for me as far as weighted opportunities considered. That's why it starts to turn red here. 49. I think that people want to kind of cling on to the ceiling for Sammy Watkins. The number that really scares me, I guess, is 1.2 yards per route run over the last 4. That's pretty tough. 4.3 catches, solid. I don't know. I think these other guys feel a little bit safer than Sammy Watkins, probably don't have the same ceiling. So let's just take into comparison someone that I do like quite a bit this week, Preston Williams. I've talked about Fitzpatrick. Jamming in Preston Williams with him still makes a ton of sense, I think, against this Jets team. A team that it is a much better matchup, but he's just slightly better in terms of his opportunity getting those deeper passes and getting a decent target share there. So I think I still prefer Preston Williams, but I'll give you like a very key tiebreaker there in favor of Sammy Watkins is that team total. So he's interesting. I think both those guys are in play. I think some of the other Jets guys, not so much interested in Demaryius Thomas or Crowder. I think they're kind of cannibalizing each other a little bit. Similar role there. So I think that if you did want to pay up for Robbie Anderson 5,500, not necessarily a value by any means, but he could be the guy that takes advantage of Miami deep, and I do expect someone to take advantage at some point. How do I handle Devante Parker versus Preston Williams? It is close. So I think that Preston Williams, they made it pretty clear, at least I thought so, that he was kind of the guy for Fitzpatrick. I do think that there's still some upside there with Devante Parker. Devante Parker is a guy that historically I've been kind of down on. So maybe I have a little bit of bias there. But I do think like Devante Parker, his price is where it's at because he scored touchdowns in I believe 3 or 4 straight games, didn't get in the end zone last week. So I think that the volume is probably safer for Preston Williams, and he has kind of that touchdown kind of progression coming his way. So I'd rather be early on Preston Williams than late on the decline of Devante Parker, if that makes sense. DJ Metcalf, yeah, I wouldn't say he's really a value, but yeah, I love him. I have a hard time kind of thinking that I'm going to make it to Tyler Lockett this week at that price, just because some of these price tags are crazy for such a small slate. So yeah, I think DK Metcalf is a guy that we know he has a super secure role in the red zone. There's definitely value in that for a highly efficient quarterback like Russell Wilson. So I think Metcalf's fine. He's not really popping in a ton of this stuff. Like he's all the way down here, right? His weight opportunity pretty low, yards per route run pretty low, total yards over the last 4 pretty low. But I think the quality of targets he's getting is kind of what you're seeing here with that ownership rate. Dolphins are so brutal. Yeah, that's some Dolphins and Jets exposure this week is probably not going to be a fun one. Let's talk about tight end. I do think there's some nice values at tight end this week. So in particular, everyone wants to talk about Dallas Goddard. He could be in play, but I'm a little bit nervous that now that Deshaun Jackson is back, that they will have to run kind of less 2 tight end sets, which if that's the case, more of a bump for Zach Ertz than kind of putting Goddard in play. So I'm not so much on Goddard. A lot of kind of talk about him. I think that he's fine. I think that if you really did want to pay down, for me, it's still going to be a guy like Noah Fant. I get that they just got a new quarterback, all of that. But I mean, it's not that the target share just went away that Sanders left behind, right? So Noah Fant saw an increase in usage because of last week without there being Emmanuel Sanders there. He was kind of next in line for that. So I think that Noah Fant, we talk about at the tight end position, how important it is, guys that are running routes. So that's something that I'm looking at quite a bit. So he's still top 10 in routes, 94 over the last 4 games. His yards per route run is extremely low. Don't love that, but I do think Fant's a talented guy. If you're just looking at kind of his player comps, playerprofiler.com has him comped as George Kittle comparison as far as an athlete. So if he can pull it together, I do think that he's interesting this week. Any news of Herman being out too helps out Fant. Steve, my dude, that's a really good point, man. Yeah, so let's keep an eye on that Herman thing. Doyle seems really intriguing. Yeah, I had someone bring that up on one of my shows, I think yesterday. So Doyle is a really interesting one in particular because if Ebron's banged up, we know T.Y.'s out. Does it end up just being Pascal at wide receiver, who we didn't talk about? It's possible. But we have seen this Colts team lean on Doyle in the past. So I think that at 3K, I mean, it's a terrible matchup against Pittsburgh, top 5 at least against tight ends. If you think those type of things are important, so I would say that's the big knock on him. But I do think that Doyle's interesting at Stone Min for sure. It's kind of splitting hairs with a couple of those guys this week. I do think that if you did want to go back to Jonnu Smith, I think that'll be a popular route for 3,800, a little bit more. Better game environment, but it is a really tough matchup against Carolina. I struggle with, some of these metrics obviously are over the last 4 games, so he won't have had all of the games without Delaney at that point. But if Delaney misses again, I think people are going to go back to the Johnny Smith train. I think he's probably okay. Another guy that's a pretty talented athlete for sure. So I think he's interesting. What is Will Dissly doing here to make sure that gets out of the update? So yeah, I think Johnny's okay. I still think Noah Fant, the guy at the cheap end of the salary spectrum that I'm kind of taking a deep look at this week. The last guy I want to talk about, Cameron Brate, 3,100 on DraftKings. My concern is Tampa Bay just hasn't shown all year that they're willing to throw their tight ends a ton. I get it. He played a decent amount of snaps last week. He's someone that we just have this view of as like this touchdown scorer from the past. I just think it's a different role now. So I will say the game environment is probably a lot stronger. It's a great matchup against Seattle. So all those things make a lot of sense. But there's a lot of people that need to be fed, I guess, with Evans and with Godwin kind of having a stranglehold kind of on the very valuable targets, I would say. So I think Brate's okay. I think that him and Noah Fant probably pretty close. I think this Goddard love has gone a little bit too far for me. Let's see if I missed anyone here at the cheap end. Mike Gesicki's going to win someone $1 million at some point, I'm sure. I'm just not sure I'll be there for it. I think a good example of just a really good athlete that's not a great actual player. Is this sheet in my Discord? Yeah, this is what I make available to all my Twitch subscribers each and every week. Update a couple times. Yeah, if you're looking for this sheet, if you're watching this on YouTube later, definitely check it out over in the Discord. I will say, too, that if you're new to the community, I do a ton of content exclusive to Instagram as well. So if you could take a few seconds and make sure you're following me over there, I would really appreciate it. If you ever found value in like any of these videos or live streams, honestly, one of the best ways to support me for free. Throw me a follow on Twitter. Throw me the connection over on LinkedIn. Doing a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn these days. Actually, gonna try and not answer any start stit or like 2v2, 1v1 type questions. Definitely not doing that on stream. But even on like Twitter and YouTube, that sort of thing in the comments, I actually have a spot for it in particular now. So special LinkedIn group. I'm going to be answering as many of those questions. No analysis because this guy versus this guy. So started that group. Check out my Twitch bio if you're interested in that. Regardless, I think there's just a lot of ways to get involved in the community. I think that this is one of the best communities, kind of growing communities in the fantasy industry. So if you want to learn more about how to be a profitable DFS player and better, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right hand corner so you don't miss anything. Be on the lookout for all of my content, but in particular, come hang out with us on Sunday morning on Twitch, twitch.tv/Joe Holka, 11:30 Eastern time. We go live. All right, good talk. I'll see you out there.